All right. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to jump right into it. First off, I didn't feel like setting up my green screen, and I've been having some difficulties getting my streaming software to pick up the sound coming out of my computer. So when I play some stuff, it's going to sound like this. There it is. According to everything, that is getting picked up, and we'll just go from there as we go along. So, anyways, jumping right into it, this is a video that is essentially a double presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about some scales and some musical form, and that's going to be the content of this video. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to introduce these 4 scales: octatonic, chromatic, whole tone, and pentatonic scales. You may already be familiar with them. You may not. If you're not, you're watching the right video. So far in my classes that I've taught, I've gone over major and minor scales. All right, and just a quick review of that. A major scale has the following pattern of whole step, half step, 3 more whole steps, and a half step. And then just a whole step is equal to 2 half steps. This means that if you play this pattern of intervals on any note on the keyboard, you will play a major scale. Here's a basic one that I'm going to play right now. And then just like with any scales, you can take notes out of that and make a chord. This synthesizer doesn't want to do chords. It's just one note at a time. That's vaguely a chord, but anyways, that is just a major scale. You can, again, play it on any note. This pattern, here's one on a different note. Different starting note, same pattern. So I've got these keyboards here. I would normally just ask my students in the classroom, what make me a scale. I'm not going to do that here because you can't give me live feedback. But that's what some of these images are for, just so you know. Why is that on the screen? Well, that's why. Okay. We've also talked about the minor scales in my sound design class, and there's 3 different kinds of them. The natural minor scale, that is essentially the same as a major scale, but you're starting on the 6th note of that major scale. When comparing it to a major scale, the 3rd, 6th, and 7th notes are all lowered by 1 note on the keyboard. So again, here's a major scale. And here's the natural minor scale. Pay attention to the 3rd, 6th, and 7th notes. Actually, I'm going to go away, synthesizer. I'm actually going to raise that up by an octave. There we go. I think it's just a little easier to hear when it's not in the basement. But anyways. There's that natural minor scale, and I think that was a little easier to hear. The harmonic minor, I'm going to compare these all to the natural minor now, is effectively the same, except we have raised the 7th scale degree by 1 note on the keyboard. It's now the same as if it was a major scale. That's where that +2 comes from, because instead of a second, a whole step, it's 1 more than that. It's this interval is 3 half steps. The melodic minor is probably the most unique in the sense of it raises the 6th and 7th scale degree some of the time. So when we play the scale in an ascending pattern, it sounds like almost like a major scale, but then when we go down the scale, it sounds like it's just like a natural minor. Again, essentially, these are all minor just because they all have that lowered third scale degree when compared to the major scale. So even though the patterns are slightly different, um, they're all minor scales because of that feature right there. One thing to note that's going to come up is that both the major and minor scales have 7 notes per octave. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we end back on the starting note an octave higher. So that's just one thing that'll come up in there. That's just a really brief overview of the scales. I'm not going to jump too much into them right now. Just that's a brief overview. The chromatic scale is the one I'm going to jump into next. This is probably the easiest one to remember because you start on a note and you play every possible note, that you can. So let's start on here on the C. Again, it is literally all half steps right there. You play every note on the keyboard. So da 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 da. If we'll pretend a C was there, that's it. So effectively, this scale is what's called a mode of limited transposition because you can't transpose it and have a unique set of notes. The chromatic scale from C to C is going to have exactly the same notes as the chromatic scale from D to D. I skipped one. There we go. And so on. So it's all the same notes. You can just start in a different place. Because of that, this doesn't fit into a key in any way. It has every note available. Okay, so you can't be like, oh, that's the chromatic scale in G. No, that's not a thing because the one in G is identical to every other scale. That's not a thing. So again, all of the intervals are identical within this scale. Another one like that is the whole tone scale, and it's functionally similar, identical to the chromatic scale in the sense of all of its intervals are the same. Except instead of being all half steps, so 12 notes in the scale, the whole tone scale is all whole steps. So there's 6 of them within the octave. So again, we go and can play just whole steps instead of half steps, and that sounds like this. I'll put it there. Again, this also has a mode of limited transposition because there's only 2 different versions. If you can, start it on, essentially, we refer to it as C or C sharp, and it's the same set of notes, but those 2, as you can see right here, the C version has all unique notes, the C sharp version has all unique notes, and that's it. If I was to play this starting on D, it would be the same. We would just go from D to D playing this collection of notes, just like the chromatic scale. I think that you can focus a little bit more into a harmonic area and kind of imply that we're focusing around a specific note. But again, just like the chromatic scale, it doesn't really have a home base. You can't be like I got my scales mixed up. The whole tone scale in B flat. Well, no, that's not really a thing because, again, the one on the B flat / A sharp is going to have all the same notes as these 6 and vice versa. So that's just a thing, but it has its own unique sound. Just playing wise, I played this top one all those times, but this one sounds the exact same, just a step up. Let me just see. Same thing, just a half step up. All right, let's keep going. Pentatonic scales are pretty fun. I think that they are relatively easy to work out in most contexts. This can be heard in a lot of what you might refer to as folk music, or music from different parts of Asia use a lot of this scale. It's called pentatonic because there's 5 notes in the octave. But the thing to remember is that there are no half steps in the scale at all. It's just like a whole tone scale, but it's not an equal division. Compared to a major scale, we have scale degrees 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and that's it. So to do it in C major, oh, I messed up. You kind of get that vibe. There are unique patterns for major and minor ones, but for this class, I'm only going over the major. If you want to learn more about the minor, there are plenty of resources online for that, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to just focus on the major. So if you want to turn a major scale into a pentatonic scale, just drop the 4th and 7th scale degree, and there you go. Fun little tidbit though, on a keyboard, if you play only the black keys, it is a pentatonic scale. I have cables in the way of these notes on my keyboard. And so on. You get the idea. So if you need a scale, don't want to use major or minor, you only play the black notes on the keyboard, you can do some improv with some pentatonic scales, and there you go. So that is that scale. The last one I'm going to mention here is the Octatonic Scale. This one has 3 unique forms, but its whole thing is that it alternates between whole steps and half steps. So whole half, whole half, whole half, whole half, or half whole, half whole, half whole, half whole, depending on where you start. And again, there's 3 unique versions. There is some overlap between the pitches, as you will see as we go. And then, just like the pentatonic scale has 5 notes per octave, the octatonic scale has 8. So let's see if I can play this. So. This is the one I'm the least good at playing on the keyboard, but that should kind of give you an idea. It's a fun collection to use. You can pull out a bunch of diminished chords and things like that from this scale. It can have a lot of uses because of the mix of the whole steps and half steps in equal parts. So again, that's essentially that. You just alternate half steps and whole steps. So again, to real briefly go through what makes each one unique. We have major and minor. I've gone over those before. I'm not going to go over them now. The chromatic is all half steps. I'm not going to play the whole scale. The whole tone is all whole steps. The pentatonic has no half steps. All right. And it's not an equal division like the whole tone. It's its own unique thing. It's all the black keys on the keyboard. And the octatonic alternates between half steps and whole steps. And that's a fun one to work with, I think. I'm just bad at playing it. So again, those are some of the more advanced scales I'm going to make my students learn in this class. That's just a real brief overview. If you want to know more, there are whole videos and lessons dedicated to each one of these in more detail. But that's kind of the base of it right there. All right, it's been about 13, 14 minutes now. I'm going to jump into this next little presentation. It's going to talk about some basic music forms. For this class, I don't go into too much detail about musical form yet. I talk about it more when we get into producing various songs in different styles. But I do want to bring up just the idea of a musical form and then some of the more simple instances of it. So basically, it's just a way for composers to arrange their musical material and for people who analyze music to talk about how it's arranged. I'm going to talk about ABA and sentence forms. So I'll be using letters a lot, and essentially the letters are just ways to talk about each section of music. You can saying, as I said in the slides, that fluty bit in G major at measure blah 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 can be confusing. Doesn't really sound professional. It's a little vague sometimes. So they decided that essentially each section gets a letter designation, and that just depends on the order that it appeared in the music. So the first section is the A section, the next different one is the B, and so on and so forth. So I should say the simplest form would be just A, and so on, where we're just repeating the same musical idea over and over again. This one I'm going to show you here is more complicated than that, but it's probably the simplest one to think of, where you have one musical idea, a different musical idea, and then you repeat the beginning musical idea. So again, you just have something, a contrasting section, the same first something again, and that's essentially it. I've got this diagram up here where we get the A section and then the B and the A. You'll notice this little tick here. That's A prime. Prime is what the tick means, and that's essentially saying that when it repeats, it doesn't have to be a verbatim identical repetition as it was originally. And in fact, most of the time, it's not. There are some variances. However, it does need to be close enough to where it's still very obviously the A material and not a new bit called C. And then I should point out one thing that, as you can see in this diagram, this excuse me, it's seasonal allergy time. Okay, I'm doing this live, so I'm not doing extra takes, so you all got to hear me cough. Wonderful. So basically, each section, as you can see in the diagram, can repeat. That's totally fine. But then each section can have its own, smaller scale. In this case, they're all A, B, A, except for the B. But you can see they all have their own unique scale, on a smaller level. So maybe this is a musical phrase, this is a phrase, and that, they all come together to play the larger A section, and so on. So this can be both the micro and macro level. In this class, at least for now, we're focusing more on the micro level, but you can use this for longer pieces of music. And then you can expand this as needed. You can get the ABACA, which is just a 5-part rondo, if you've heard those words before, where you're just alternating between the A form, the A section, and then different other sections, in this case B and C, and if you want a D and E and so forth, there you can go. I've got A, B, C, D, C, B, A, where it's just kind of an overall arch form is what they call it, and you kind of notice it's the same thing forward and backwards. So that's all of that little bit of information, just ABA form. Again, I'm going very broadly. Now, I'm not going to play this because, knowing my luck, it will somehow manage to get copyright striked, and then this video will not be very helpful for my students. But here is a tune that, if you don't know it, here it is. It's Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. This is a simplified version of a melody by Mozart. You get da 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 na 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 na. There's the note. So here's the A section. Is these 4 measures right here? You'll notice that again the A, and then here on measure 9 we get the same as the opening right here, but these middle measures are different. Just the way that it's contrasted here is generally we go up and down, and here we just kind of go down. We're just kind of living in the middle range. And it repeats, and then we get the up and down motion again. So again, it's very clearly an A, B, A, just like that. Sentence form, a little more complex. And again, this, generally speaking, I tend to find it more in smaller scale sections of music, but you can use it again on the larger scale. in many different places, but I found that it's generally a way to organize smaller sections of music. Generally, you can see it as an AABB form, but I'll jump into it in a different section. But the way it works is you state an idea and you repeat it. Usually it's transposed to begin on a different note, but it doesn't have to be. You then expand on that idea before reaching the conclusion of your little musical phrase. The how you continue it, the BB in this diagram here, can vary. There usually are some overlappings in characteristics. I mean, you want it to feel like a continuation, not a completely different thing, but they have their own unique character. Fragmenting or taking just a smaller section of the A portion and focusing on that is a very common thing to see done. Let's just look at this a little bit here. So we've got what we call the presentation, the A right here. So da 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 da. I'm bad at singing. I'm not even trying for the pitches, but you see that there's this material right here, and then it repeats, but it is transposed to be different notes, but it's very clearly the same thing. The continuation, the BB, we have the little fragments here where it's just focusing on that last half of the idea. We have that right there, and then we end the melody with a cadence right here at the end. So again, we get the A, these four measures, the BB, these next two, and then we end it right here. I haven't talked about cadences yet, so I'm going to talk about that at the end of this video. But again, this is a brief idea of sentence form where we present, continue, end. So basic idea, repetition, A, fragmentation, boom, B, cadence. I can only repeat that so much. The harmonies here are helpful, but not necessarily needed to have something in this form. All right, so a cadential figure. So there are many different kinds of cadences. Each one has their own rules, and I could do a whole 30-minute lesson on just cadences. I'm not going to do that. For now, I'm just going to talk about the authentic cadence and how that's useful. And but before I jump into that, just essentially a cadence is when you'll notice the music kind of comes to a natural rest, a little pause. And in the terms of an authentic cadence, if we move from 5 or a 5/7 chord to a 1, the tonic, if we're in the key of B flat, that's a B flat chord. So you move from F to B flat. I can't play chords on this synthesizer. That kind of movement. It, again, lets the music pause and come to a rest. This happens at the end of musical phrases, so it's a very useful thing to have. Again, in the key of C, you would start with a G chord, and then you would end on a C chord. Whether it's major or minor, that depends on the context. But again, it's the end of musical phrases. Just to illustrate that and get into the authentic cadence examples, again, that's just an authentic cadence is just 5/1. That's it. And we see we get, in this case, these are in B flat, so we get F major chords going to B flat major chords. And so on. What makes it a perfect or an imperfect cadence is just depends on what note is in the melody, or sometimes just the top voice of the harmony. If it ends on the tonic scale degree 1 here, then it's a perfect authentic cadence. If it is anything else, it's considered an imperfect authentic cadence. So you'll notice in these perfect cadences, they're all voiced so that the home note B flat is the top voice. All right, essentially the melody line note in that chord. In the imperfect ones, we get one where it's an F, one where it's a D. It's anything except that B flat. So that's that. And it's just 5/1 is an authentic cadence. That's that. And then it can either be perfect or imperfect depending on whether or not the scale degree 1 is in the highest note, the highest voice of the chord. And that's essentially it. It's a relatively straightforward bit of process. Again, there are more complex ones. This example uses a half cadence that I'm not gonna get into, but there are options there. But for the purposes, I can't talk anymore, of this course, this pretty much sums it up. Again, we just the 5/1. That's the important thing for a cadence, and you want to stick that at the end of your phrases so that way it relaxes. We have the sentence form, which again is just we present an idea with a repetition, we continue it, and then we end it. The ABA, where we have one idea, an idea that's different, and then we have that original idea again. And that's that. I've already summarized all the scales and everything, so I'll put links to these slides in the video description as soon as I'm done talking. As always, if you ever have questions about any of these materials, feel free to drop a line in the comments. I always love answering those. And yeah, that'll sum it up. I'll catch you all next time that